The cold had teeth that night, the kind that bit through winter coats and turned breath into frozen clouds before it could leave your lungs. Under the amber glow of a street lamp, something small lay motionless in the snow, a shape too still to be sleeping, too fragile to have survived the wind that had been howling since sunset. At first glance it looked like the work of winter's cruelty, another casualty of a season that showed no mercy to the small and the lost. He almost didn't stop. The workday had been long, the drive home longer, and all he wanted was the warmth of his living room and the quiet company of his cat. But something made him slow the car, maybe the way the snow had drifted around the tiny form, creating a hollow that looked almost protective, or maybe it was simply the stubborn human instinct that refuses to look away from suffering. He pulled over, left the engine running, and stepped out into the bitter night. The wind cut across the empty street as he knelt beside the bundle of fur. A kitten, he thought at first. Some poor stray that had wandered too far from shelter. But when he brushed the snow away, his breath caught. The markings were wrong, too bold, too wild. Dark spots scattered across a pale coat, ear tufts that pointed skyward like miniature antennae, paws disproportionately large for such a small body. This wasn't a house cat. This was something that belonged to the forest, to the mountains, to places where humans rarely ventured. A bobcat kitten, barely alive. He didn't think. There wasn't time for thinking. He peeled off his coat, wrapped the frozen body in the fleece lining, and cradled it against his chest as he ran back to the car. The heating vents roared to life as he turned them all toward the passenger seat where he'd laid the bundle. Through the fabric he could feel how cold the kitten was. Not just cold but frozen, as if winter had already claimed it and was simply waiting for the formality of death to catch up. The drive home blurred into a series of frantic calculations. How long had it been out there? Hours certainly, maybe longer. The body temperature would be dangerously low. Hypothermia didn't just mean cold, it meant organs shutting down, blood thickening, the heart giving up its rhythm. He'd read somewhere that you had to warm them slowly, carefully. Too fast, and the shock could kill them just as surely as the cold. His hands shook as he unlocked the front door, not from the temperature but from the weight of what he was holding. Life, hanging by the thinnest of threads. Inside, he moved with purpose born of desperation. The guest bathroom became an emergency room. Heating pad set to low, wrapped in towels to prevent burns. A cardboard box lined with soft blankets. A shallow dish of lukewarm water, just in case the kitten could drink. He worked through the night in near silence, broken only by the hum of the heating pad and the whisper of his own breathing. Gently, so gently, he rubbed the tiny paws trying to coax circulation back into the pads that had gone gray with cold. The bobcat didn't move, didn't cry, just lay there, a small testament to nature's brutality and fragility intertwined. Just one night, he whispered to the unconscious kitten, to himself, to the universe that seemed to be listening through the bathroom's quiet walls. That's all. One night to get you stable, and then the wildlife center will know what to do. But even as he said it, even as he told himself this was temporary, a brief intervention before professionals took over, he knew he was lying. Not intentionally, not even consciously, but somewhere in the careful way he arranged the blankets, in the tenderness with which he monitored each shallow breath, he was already letting something take root, something that didn't have a name yet but felt dangerously close to attachment. Around 3 in the morning, he heard it, not from the bathroom, but from the hallway beyond, the soft pad of paws on hardwood, a presence in the doorway. Milo, his tabby cat, stood at the threshold, amber eyes fixed on the box that held the stranger. The man held his breath, waiting for the inevitable, the hiss, the arched back, the territorial aggression that any house cat would show toward a wild predator in their domain. Milo was gentle by nature, but he was still a cat, still governed by instincts that should have screamed danger at the scent of bobcat. But Milo didn't hiss. He approached with the cautious curiosity of someone encountering a puzzle rather than a threat. Step by careful step, he crossed the tile floor until he stood at the edge of the box. The man watched, transfixed as Milo lowered his head and sniffed once, twice at the bundle of spotted fur. A moment passed, then another, and then, With a gentleness that seemed to defy every law of nature and instinct, Milo began to groom the bobcat's frozen ears. Long, deliberate strokes of his rough tongue across the delicate tufts, methodical, purposeful, as if he understood, somehow, that this tiny wild thing needed warmth and comfort more than it needed to be feared or driven away. The bobcat didn't stir, still too cold, too weak, but Milo didn't stop. He groomed until the ears were damp with his attention, until the ice crystals that had formed there began to melt. The man sat back against the bathroom wall, stunned into silence. In all his years of living with Milo, he'd never seen behavior like this. Cats were territorial. They were cautious. They protected their space with fierce determination. Yet here was Milo offering comfort to a creature that should have triggered every alarm bell in his feline brain. The heating pad hummed. The bobcat's breathing remained shallow but steady. Milo settled beside the box, not quite touching but close enough that his body heat would help. Close enough that if the bobcat woke, the first thing it would sense would not be isolation but companionship. And in the pre-dawn quiet of that bathroom, as winter raged outside and warmth slowly returned to a body that had nearly surrendered to the cold, a question formed in the man's mind. One he couldn't answer, one that would follow him through the days ahead. Why would a domestic cat instantly adopt a wild predator that should have terrified him? Morning light filtered through the bathroom window, soft and pale. The man woke slumped against the wall, his neck stiff from hours in an awkward position. The first thing he noticed was warmth, not from the heating pad, but from something alive and breathing. Milo had moved into the box during the night. He lay curled in a tight crescent around the bobcat kitten, his tabby body forming a living shield against the world. And the bobcat, no longer gray and lifeless, was breathing stronger now. Tiny paws twitched as it dreamed, pressing against Milo's fur with instinctive seeking. The man rubbed his eyes, wondering if exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But no, this was real. A domestic cat had chosen to become a guardian to a wild thing that nature had meant to be his opposite. The days that followed unfolded like a story the man couldn't have written if he'd tried. Milo refused to leave the bobcat's side. When the kitten cried, soft chirping sounds that were neither fully wild nor domestic, Milo would meow back, loud and insistent, until the man came to check. When it was time to eat, Milo dragged his own toys to the bobcat's bed, batting them close as if to say, "Here, these are yours now too." At night they slept as they had that first morning. Milo wrapped protectively around his wild charge, warming it with more than just body heat. The man tried to separate them once for safety. He moved the bobcat's box to another room, thinking boundaries were necessary. Within an hour, Milo was scratching at the door, yowling with such distress that the man gave up. When he reunited them, Milo groomed the bobcat's face for 10 straight minutes, as if scolding it for the separation neither had chosen. By the second week, the bobcat was eating solid food, its spotted coat now sleek and healthy. It learned to walk with steady confidence, to play with the gentleness Milo taught through patient example. Head bumps instead of bites, slow blinks that meant trust, soft paws instead of claws. The man watched them chase each other through the living room, a tabby and a bobcat playing tag, like littermates who'd known each other since birth. But wildness couldn't be fully tamed. The bobcat's pounces grew more precise, more powerful. It climbed curtains with predatory grace. Its eyes tracked birds through windows, with an intensity that spoke of ancient instincts awakening. And yet, every evening, it would curl beside Milo. Every morning it greeted the tabby cat with touches that looked like love. The man stopped calling the wildlife center. He told himself it was because the bobcat was still recovering. But the truth settled in his chest like a stone. This wasn't temporary anymore. Something unusual, something beautiful and impossible, was unfolding in his home, and he didn't know if he had the strength to end it. Growth came fast, too fast for comfort, too slow to prepare for what it meant. Within weeks the bobcat's legs lengthened, its shoulders broadened, its paws spread wide with muscle beneath the fur. What had been a fragile kitten now moved with the calculated power of something born to hunt. Play fighting with Milo grew more intense, swipes that could have hurt, pounces that carried real weight. But Milo never flinched, never retreated. He trusted the bobcat completely, even when the man's heart climbed into his throat, watching them tumble across the floor. The call to the wildlife center felt inevitable, a formality he'd been avoiding but could no longer ignore. "He's healthy," the voice on the phone said, professional and matter-of-fact. "Strong enough for transitioning. We can take him in 2 weeks, start the rewilding process." 2 weeks, 14 days until he broke the bond that Milo had formed, a bond that seemed less like tolerance and more like love. The man watched his tabby cat groom the bobcat's face that evening, the same gentle attention he'd given that first frozen night, and something cracked inside his chest. He built an enclosure in the yard, large enough to climb, to stalk, to remember what wildness felt like. The bobcat explored it with fearless curiosity, leaping onto platforms, tracking insects with predatory focus, nose lifted to catch scents the wind carried from the forest beyond. This was what he was meant for: open sky, living prey, freedom that couldn't be contained in a living room, no matter how much love filled it. But every evening as the sun dropped below the tree line, the bobcat would return to the glass door that separated yard from house. He'd press his spotted face against it, amber eyes scanning the interior until he found Milo, and Milo would be there, waiting on the other side, paw raised to touch the glass where their noses met. The man stood in his kitchen watching this ritual, coffee growing cold in his hand, and wrestled with a question that had no good answer. Was returning him to the wild the right thing to do, even if it shattered both their hearts? Even if Milo cried for weeks afterward? Even if the bobcat spent his first nights of freedom wondering why his family had disappeared? The stronger the bobcat became, the more impossible the choice felt. And spring was coming. The wildlife center was waiting. Time was running out for all of them. Spring arrived with the scent of wet earth and new leaves. The bobcat was no longer small. He moved with the fluid power of something fully wild, muscles rippling beneath spotted fur, eyes sharp with instincts that no amount of domestic love could suppress. The morning came too soon. The man and Milo walked the enclosure one last time, supervised by wildlife staff who waited at the forest's edge with quiet patience. The bobcat nuzzled both of them, Milo first, a long press of forehead to forehead, then the man's outstretched hand. For a moment, amber eyes met human ones, and the man could have sworn he saw understanding there. Gratitude, maybe, or goodbye. Then without hesitation, the bobcat turned and walked into the trees. He didn't look back. Wild things rarely do. The house felt hollow. Milo wandered from room to room, crying softly, a sound the man had never heard from him before. Not angry, not frightened, just lost. The tabby cat would sit by the glass door for hours, waiting for a spotted face that didn't come. Days passed, then a week. The man began to wonder if he'd made a terrible mistake, if he'd chosen principle over compassion, wildness over the love that had saved a life. 3 weeks later, he checked the trail camera he'd mounted near the tree line. Mostly it captured deer, the occasional fox, but when he scrolled to the newest footage, his breath stopped. There, standing at the edge of the woods, magnificent and healthy, was the bobcat, bigger now, confident, undeniably thriving in the life he was meant for. But he wasn't just passing through, he was watching the house. And in the audio feed, beneath the rustle of wind through branches, the camera had captured something that made the man's throat tighten. 2 soft meows, responding to Milo's cries from the porch. That evening, the man opened the back door. The bobcat emerged from the shadows, not all the way into the yard, but close enough. Milo stepped forward slowly, and for one perfect moment, they touched noses, wild and domestic, forest and home, meeting in the space between 2 worlds. Then the bobcat slipped back into the trees, carrying with him a bond that would outlast seasons and distance. He stayed only one night, but he left a connection that would last a lifetime.